Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
16 people were arrested as part of an investigation into large-scale organized retail theft in the Greater Toronto Area this year. All 16 were out on release orders. It's something we're hearing more and more. Repeat criminals getting arrested one day and then they're out on bail and reoffending the next day. It has prompted calls for bail reform. It has also led to a lot of finger-pointing and confusion. Who is responsible for bail reform and what is holding it up? I'm Phil Martino. On this episode of The Big Story, we're delving into the issue of bail reform. York Regional Police Superintendent Ryan Hogan oversees organized crime and intelligence services. We did a story this year involving York Regional Police, multiple people arrested, all out on bail. What's that like for you? Because police do all the work to get these people arrested.
It's certainly an issue that is frustrating for frontline police officers and for all of us here at York Regional Police. And, part of that frustration comes from really what we're hearing from the community. Each and every day, the community is impacted by repeat offenders. We know that the people that are committing crime in the community are, really a small segment of the population, right? But when you have repeat offenders committing a huge amount of the crime, it really is frustrating for the people that are on the front line doing the work to see the same people over and over, back committing crime, back on the streets, really in a catch and release type of environment. And we know that there's provisions that allow us to keep people in custody and to hold people for bail and to hold people detained in custody until their matter is dealt with. But, day in and day out, we see people being arrested that are already on bail or multiple bails. Just last week, you're probably familiar with a lot of the armed robberies that are being reported on, with the jewelry store robberies, the, group of people going in with hammers and terrorizing the store owners, the patrons that are in the malls. And just last week, we had 4 people arrested, everyone on bail. One person was on 5 bails, 3 of which were for robbery already. Another person on bail for 3 robberies already. Back out in the community doing another jewelry store robbery. And so, we have to question, is there something that we're not doing right here to protect the community? Because we can only do so much. It's a shared responsibility. It's shared between the police, it's shared with the provincial government, with the federal government, with the court, with the ministries, and the community. And so everyone has a piece to play in ensuring that there's meaningful bail, that there's meaningful bail reform, and that, we are doing our very best to protect the community from repeat violent offenders.
Is this a new problem?
It certainly has got, in my view, has got worse in recent years. But this is something that we've been at York Regional Police, that we've been kind of beating the drum on since at least 2019, 2020, when we were doing some reporting back then on a huge increase in what we saw as basically a flagrant disregard for court orders, whether that was probation, bail, parole. We were seeing it then, but it has got worse. It has gotten worse, and we see that, post-pandemic, it's worse now than what I remember, a decade ago. It's significantly worse. But we were seeing this back in 2019, 2020, and I think post-pandemic, we have seen it even on the increase in the last couple of years. And I can't really put my finger on to say why that is happening, but each and every day we are seeing repeat offenders committing crimes again. And, when I look at the bail system and ask, why or what's happening that we can do differently, I mentioned it's a shared responsibility between all of us. A couple of the things that we look at are, when someone violates their bail, that piece of paper is supposed to mean something. It's not simply just a piece of paper that compels you to follow the rules. There's an actual consequence if you breach that bail. There is supposed to be a monetary consequence to that. And, I think one of the things that would be impactful as a deterrent is if we started seeing those financial consequences come into play. And personally, we don't see that happen very often. And so what is the deterrent if you're not going to lose the money that you've put forward as a surety? Um, I think that's something that has to change. Like, I think an actual requirement for an accused to show cause when it is a reverse onus situation would make a difference. Sometimes we're seeing that even though it is reverse onus and the person is in custody, that they are still released on consent when they're already on multiple bails. And, a change to that system and requiring the person to actually show cause in a reverse onus situation would make a difference.
Now, I was speaking earlier this year to, he's like a crime specialist who was a professor at a university in Ontario. And he told me that you can't keep all these people in custody because there's not enough room. So what's the answer? Do you build a facility to put everyone in there? Could that possibly be a solution?
It's funny because, in this, we are a democratic society where we have presumption of innocence, and, that's important. And we can't ever lose sight of the fact that people have to be presumed innocent until found guilty. However, there comes a point where the risk to the community has to be factored into the consideration of release. And there's a lot of provisions in the criminal code that allow for that, gradual restriction on surety and the eventual detention of a person. To say simply that we don't have enough facilities to incarcerate people, that's a complex solution to a complex problem. And if it means that we have to build further jails to account for further people that are committing crime, then I would advocate that needs to happen. Tempered, of course, with, and this is very important, that there has to be real meaningful solutions upstream. We have to acknowledge that poverty plays a significant role in the amount of crime that we're seeing on the street, at the street level. And so we can't lose sight of the fact that while perhaps more custodial institutions need to be built, that has to be buffered up against resources upstream aimed at poverty and education and meaningful work for young people. That has to be there.
Graham McGregor is Associate Minister of Auto Theft and Bail Reform in Ontario. Can we start with, if you can explain to us, how does the bail system work in Ontario?
Well, poorly, but I'll explain from a basic standpoint how it's supposed to work. So it's predicated on how we employ justice in Ontario. So a criminal commits a crime. They're charged with a crime by police. If that crime is serious enough that it needs to go to trial, they have a bail hearing. And then what happens then is either the bail is consented to, if it's kind of a very minor crime or minor offense, it's something that's consented to by the police or by the Crown Attorney. If it is contested, then a judge or a justice of the peace has to make a ruling whether that person will be allowed out on bail until their trial or held in detention, held in a provincial jail. And this is a determination that they make basically on the assumption that how likely is that person to, one, reoffend and commit another crime, or to return for their trial.
You mentioned the word poor. Now, what do you think are the problems with our bail system?
So the system that I described to you is how it is supposed to work. And I think if we were looking at what an ideal society looked like and what people want to see in our neighborhoods, is that the determination is really looking at, will that offender reoffend? Will we keep our community safe? What's the likelihood of that person committing more crime? And I think that what they want to see and what we want to see is in violent, serious offenses, for the auction of bail, the availability of bail to either be very restricted or in some cases just not an option at all. And what we're seeing right now with the criminal code, the way that it's been edited in 2019, is that all of the rights and all of the well wishes that the justice system can offer to criminals, it feels like they're giving it to them. They're taking into consideration the socioeconomic circumstances, what happened in somebody's life to lead them to commit a crime, et cetera. And we have a very basic premise. If you are committing an offense, you commit a crime, you should face the time for that sentence. If you're sticking a gun in somebody's face, you should be in jail. And we can talk about how society could have treated that person better, where they wouldn't make these types of choices in their life. Sure, fine. But the fact is, in in a society like ours, we need to have laws, we need to have order, we need to have rules, and those rules need to be enforced. And unfortunately, right now, we're not seeing that as much as we'd like.
I'm a reporter. I go out in the field. Say I go to a crime scene and the person is charged. Then we hear from the police that that person's out on bail. It's frustrating for me to hear that. This year, there was an investigation in New York region, 16 people arrested, 16 people charged, all 16 out on bail. How frustrating is it for you to hear that?
Oh God, it's hugely frustrating. I think it's frustrating for any of us that interact with the system. You hear it from police, you hear from frontline officers and police chiefs all the time. An individual that's been arrested and they're out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. But beyond the frustration, I wonder how it must feel for victims. And we've heard from some victims and families of victims of crime. How does it feel to have be in a scenario where somebody's putting a gun to your face, tapping on the window of your car, saying, "Give me the keys to your car." You call the police, they do their job, they lay an arrest. That person, are hoping that person faces justice for their actions and they go to jail. And then you see them at Walmart the next week because they got a slap on the wrist and our justice system is acting as a revolving door. I mean, it's just not right. I don't think it's not a good outcome for anybody. And it's really where we take this really progressive ideology, the soft on crime approach, that if we just treated criminals nicely, they would stop committing crime. That's where these laws really came from, their ideological root. And it's not working. It's not working in my neighborhood in Brampton, where I'm from. It's not working in the GTA or anywhere in Ontario or the country, frankly.
Now, Ontario has been calling on the federal government to make bail-related changes to the criminal code. Can you explain what changes are you looking for?
Yeah, we've been demanding for criminal code reform in line with the other provinces. I'll say it's not just Ontario; it's the other 9 provinces. It's the other 3 territories. We've been demanding bail reform for over a year now. And 2 months ago, we decided to get very prescriptive in what we would like to see, and we asked for a few things. One, we've asked the federal government to restore mandatory minimum sentencing for serious crimes, firearm offenses, which are sentences that they removed. For example, we used to, using a firearm in the conduct of a crime, a loaded firearm, used to net you 4 years minimum in prison. It was something that the Liberal government stripped away. We think it's common sense. I mean, if you're using a firearm in the conduct of a crime, you should face a minimum 4 years. I don't think that's anything anyone can disagree with. We've also asked for them to remove bail availability for offenders that are charged with murder, terrorism, human trafficking, intimate partner violence, drug trafficking, use or possession of restricted or prohibited firearms, or armed robbery, for example, carjackings and home invasions. What we've seen is, because the criminal code is so lax, and because frankly, I think a lot of judges have interpreted our laws in a very an even more progressive way. We just want to take these out of the judge's hands. If you are convicted or charged with a serious violent offense, like, you should have access to a trial. I'm not doubting that, and we got to make sure you in that. But you should be held in detention while we figure it out. If the sentence is serious enough, you should be held in jail while we wait for the trial. We've also asked for a 3-strike rule for some of these less serious offenses. Say property crime or auto theft would be an example of this, where if you are hauled in front of a judge a second time and then a third time, you are going to be held in detention until we get to your trial. What we're seeing oftentimes, we're hearing from police. You cited the York case. We see it in Peel and Toronto, and frankly, all across Ontario and the country. Offenders that are out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, again and again and again, committing the same offenses. And we are hearing from residents and police and others that enough is enough. We need some law and order back in our society. We need to get tough on criminals again, and we think these recommendations will really help us get there.
We have done this bail reform story this year several times at 680 News. I have reached out to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. And if I may, I want to read out a statement I received from the office. And basically it said, we listened to the provinces and territories when they asked for changes to the criminal code. Now they need to step up and enforce the law, which falls within their sphere of jurisdiction. Provinces, including Ontario, are responsible for the administration of bail, and more needs to be done to make sure police and prosecutors have the tools they need for effective monitoring and enforcement. In Ontario, the justices of the peace, who most often make bail decisions, are provincial appointees, and prosecutors have the ability to initiate a bail review to challenge a bail decision. Provincial courts, prosecutors, and police hold the data needed to evaluate how the bail system is working. We expect provinces and territories to collect and share that data diligently as they committed to do. What's your reaction to this statement?
Fortunately, I've read that statement before, and it's the typical thing that we hear from the federal government. You see it right at the top of the statement is this assumption that the criminal code is perfect, and anything that's going wrong is on behalf of the Ontario government or other provinces. Look, we're united with every other province, all 9 other provinces, all 3 other territories, that we need a strong criminal code that prioritizes the rights of communities and families to live safe in their community over the rights of criminals to be let back out on the street time and time again. This is a mess that the federal Liberal government made in 2019 when they brought in the least restrictive bail laws that you possibly could. The minister is right about a few things. One, we do appoint justices of the peace and we do appoint judges, but we don't tell them what to do after we appoint them. We have a separation between the provincial government and judges, and just like politicians can't necessarily order police and tell police what to do, we can't order judges what to do, but politicians can write the rubric on how they make their decisions, and that is fully within control of the federal government through the criminal code. And when you look at our bail system, the examples that you cited in York, I'll cite some other examples in Toronto or in Peel region. Unfortunately, the bail system is working exactly how it was written, exactly how it was intended. In 2019, the Liberal government intended to allow more people out on bail, and the system's working exactly how it is. So, we are building jails, we're building new courthouses, we've got new judges that are being hired. 3 more in Windsor came online last week. We've got 25 this year that we're adding new. We've got 190 court support staff, crown prosecutors, etc. We're adding 2,000 more frontline police officers this year across Ontario to various police jurisdictions. We're throwing a lot of resources at this problem. Where we are being let down is a weak, ineffectual criminal code, which is letting these, frankly, pardon if I say this, but these scumbag hardened criminals out onto our streets time and time again.
All right. Thanks to Graham McGregor for joining me on the Big Story podcast. Follow us on X at The Big Story, FPN, and leave your comments. You can also listen to The Big Story and other frequency podcasts like The Roz and Mocha Show on our Seeker app. That's SEEKR. Thank you for listening.